You know those nights when everyone expects the same glamorous speeches, the same rehearsed smiles, the same safe show. This was supposed to be one of those nights, until a man no one expected to see again walked into the room and changed everything. The cameras were already bored before the show even started. Same red carpet, same questions, same answers about my incredible team and the fans who made this possible. Inside the theater, the air smelled of perfume, nerves, and quiet competition. Agents checked their phones, directors rehearsed their surprised faces, and somewhere in the middle row, a young assistant named Maya adjusted the headset on her ears, reminding herself not to cry on her first big job. She had promised herself, tonight she would just do her work, stay invisible, and not think about the man whose movies once got her through the hardest nights of her life. Maya had grown up watching his films on a tiny second-hand TV in a noisy apartment. When her parents fought in the next room, she would turn up the volume and lose herself in stories where he always chose kindness over anger, where he took every hit and still got up again. Years later, when her father walked out and her mother got sick, it was his quiet strength on screen that kept her from giving up. But that was before the accident, before the rumors, before Hollywood decided he was done. For 3 years, Maya had heard his name only in whispers. Burnout, broken, disappeared. The industry moved on. They always did. Backstage now, she checked the show rundown again. His name wasn't on any list, no seat card, no presenting slot, nothing. Of course it was. He had vanished from premieres, from interviews, from the world. Some people said he couldn't face the cameras anymore. Others said he had walked away because he was tired of pretending. Whatever the truth was, Maya had accepted she would never see him in person. She had even made peace with that in a way. Heroes, she had learned, were safer on screens than in real life. Out in the audience, producers laughed too loudly at jokes they didn't find funny. A famous actress in a gold dress practiced her gracious loser expression in the reflection of a champagne glass. The host, somewhere between terrified and arrogant, rehearsed his opening lines one last time. Under the golden lights, everything glowed like perfection, but it was a brittle kind of beauty, one that would shatter at the slightest pressure. No one here knew that a quiet decision made 12 hours earlier was about to break through this polished surface like a storm. Because while stylists pinned dresses and makeup artists powdered foreheads, a black car had pulled up to a side entrance no one used anymore. A figure stepped out, wearing a simple dark suit, no entourage, no publicist, no security detail clearing the way. The guard at the door almost didn't recognize him, not because his face had changed, but because there was something different in his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a man chasing attention. They were the eyes of someone who had seen loss up close and chosen, somehow, to walk back into the light anyway. At that exact moment, Maya's headset crackled. "We might have a problem at stage left," came the stage manager's voice, tight with confusion. "Or not a problem, I don't know, just get over here." Maya hurried down the narrow hallway, the hum of the crowd growing louder with every step. Her heart pounded, partly from the rush, partly from a fear she couldn't name. She turned the corner, nearly colliding with a security guard stepping aside to let someone pass. And then she saw him, older, a little thinner hair falling to his shoulders, the same tired warmth in his face she had memorized as a child. He walked slowly, as if each step toward the stage was a question he still wasn't sure he should answer. No cameras yet, no applause, just a handful of stunned crew members and one young assistant frozen in place, trying to remember how to breathe. He glanced up, and for a second their eyes met. There was no movie star distance, no practiced charm. There was only a quiet, almost fragile kindness, like he was the one who didn't belong here. Maya's throat tightened. All at once, the years between the girl on the floor with a cheap DVD and the woman in a headset collapsed. The man whose characters had taught her not to give up stood a few feet away, very real, very human, stepping back into a world that had already written his final chapter without asking him. She opened her mouth to speak, to say anything, but her voice failed her. And just as she found the courage to take a step toward him, a producer rushed in, pale and frantic, holding a tablet with the live schedule on it, his eyes wide as he blurted out the one question that could shatter everything. "What are you doing here?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, sharper than it needed to be. The hallway went silent. A sound technician pretended to check his cables. A makeup artist stared a little too hard at her powder brush. No one wanted to be caught watching, but every eye was on him. The man at the center of it all didn't flinch right away. He just let the words settle, as if he'd expected some version of this the moment he decided to come. When he finally answered, his voice was softer than Maya imagined, but steady. "I was invited," he said. I just didn't think anyone would believe I'd show up." The producer blinked, thrown off by the calm. He turned the tablet around, scrolling. "You're not on the run of show. There's no segment, no intro, no seat assignment. If this is some kind of—" He stopped, catching himself before saying stunt. Maya watched the tension in her hero's jaw, the way his fingers curled loosely at his sides, not in anger, but in an effort to stay grounded. This wasn't a man trying to hijack attention. It was someone walking back into a house that used to feel like home and finding the locks changed. Maya felt a familiar spark of anger rise in her chest, the same one she used to feel when people mocked him online after the accident, when they called him broken or washed up without knowing anything about his grief. She remembered reading every interview, every rumor, trying to understand why someone so gentle, so consistently kind, had disappeared. The official story was that he needed a break. The whispered one was crueler, that he couldn't handle the pressure anymore, that he'd lost his edge, that his pain had made him difficult. Tonight, standing so close she could see the small tremor in his left hand, she realized those rumors had never been about him. They'd been about an industry that didn't know what to do with real vulnerability. Before the producer could push further, the stage manager appeared, out of breath, headset askew. He took one look at the scene, then at the man who had once carried entire franchises on his shoulders. His expression shifted from irritation to recognition to something like guilt. "You really came," he murmured, almost to himself. Then louder, we did invite you. It was informal, a private email. We didn't put it in the system because," he faltered, glancing around at the listening crew. "Because we weren't sure you'd say yes." For the first time, a flicker of hurt crossed the actor's face. "You thought I was done," he said quietly, not accusing, just stating a fact. "That's fair." He looked down for a moment, his voice barely audible over the distant roar of the audience. "I almost thought I was, too." There was a weight behind those words, years of silent rooms and hospital visits and restless nights. Maya imagined him alone somewhere far from all this glitter, wondering if the world would be better off without his presence, his stories, his pain. The stage manager cleared his throat. "Look, we're live in 20 minutes. We can't rewrite the entire show. The network," he hesitated, then made a decision Maya didn't expect. "But I can still seat you, if you're willing to just be here. No speech, no segment, just you in the room." It sounded like so little, like an afterthought. But the way he said it carried something else, a quiet recognition that sometimes courage isn't about making a grand return. Sometimes it's about sitting in a place that once broke you and choosing not to walk away. For a long second, the actor said nothing. His gaze drifted toward the edge of the curtain where faint flashes of stage lights spilled into the hallway. Being just in the room meant being on camera again. It meant critics dissecting his appearance, tabloids zooming in on the lines on his face, fans analyzing every micro-expression. It meant facing the ghosts of roles he'd turned down, friendships that had faded, projects that had gone on without him. It meant willingly standing in a place that had turned his deepest tragedies into headlines. Maya's chest tightened. She thought of how she had hidden from the world when her mother got sick, how she used to sit in hospital waiting rooms pretending to scroll her phone so no one would talk to her. It had taken everything inside her to apply for this job, to walk into an industry she had only watched from a distance. She saw the same battle now in him, multiplied 1,000 times. He could walk back out to the car and no one could blame him. Or he could stay, risking judgment, humiliation, maybe even pity, just to prove to himself he wasn't finished. "I didn't come to be invisible," he said finally, and for a heartbeat Maya thought he was refusing. Then he added, "But I didn't come to steal the show either." He drew in a slow breath. "I came because someone once told me you don't heal in the dark, you heal where the light is harshest." His eyes moved over the small crowd of crew members, people who weren't expecting a speech, who would go home with calluses and sore feet and no headlines. "If it's okay, I'll sit wherever you put me. Just don't hide me behind a pillar, all right?" A few people chuckled nervously. The tension broke just enough for them to breathe. The stage manager nodded, suddenly decisive. "Front center, middle row, cameras will catch you but not obsess over you. You'll be present." The word echoed in the hallway, present. After years of absence, it sounded almost radical. The actor gave a small, grateful nod, and for the first time since he arrived, a real, unforced smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. As the group began to move, the producer pulled the stage manager aside, whispering furiously, "Are you insane? Do you realize what this will do to the ratings? We need a segment. We need a reveal. We need—" The stage manager cut him off, voice low but firm. "What we need is to not break the only brave thing he's done in years by turning it into a stunt." His eyes hardened. "We've already taken enough from him." Maya followed a few steps behind as they guided her hero toward the entrance to the auditorium. Her thoughts raced. This was bigger than a surprise appearance now. It was about how Hollywood treated people who dared to be human, who stumbled and grieved and disappeared for a while. She wanted to say something. Thank you, you saved me. You don't know what your movies did for a scared kid in a noisy apartment. But every time she opened her mouth, fear stopped her. Who was she to interrupt his first steps back into the spotlight? At the threshold, just before stepping into the ocean of lights and lenses, he paused. The muffled sound of the host's warm-up jokes seeped through the heavy door. Laughter, applause, the familiar hum of expectation. His shoulders rose and fell with one last steadying breath, as if he were about to walk into a scene with no script. Then, without warning, he turned slightly, his gaze landing directly on Maya. "You work back here?" he asked, his voice gentle, curious. Caught off guard, she nodded too fast. "Why, yes. Assistant stage coordinator, it's my first, real show." She wanted to disappear and be seen at the same time. He studied her for a moment, as if reading past the badge on her lanyard to the person underneath, to the girl who had memorized his lines in the dark. "First shows are hard," he said. "You doing okay?" The question was so simple, so ordinary, but no one had asked her that all night, not like they meant it. Suddenly her throat burned with unshed tears. She forced a shaky smile. "I am now," she managed. He gave her a small nod, as if they had just made an unspoken promise to each other. To stay, to keep going, to face the light no matter how much it hurt. Then the door opened, and a wave of golden brightness and camera flashes washed over him. He stepped forward, crossing the invisible line between backstage shadows and public gaze, the murmurs in the auditorium swelling as faces turned and whispers spread from row to row. And as he walked down that aisle, every eye in the room widening in disbelief, Maya watched from the doorway, heart pounding, realizing with a jolt that his quiet act of courage was about to collide with a secret the producers hadn't told him yet. One hidden envelope in a locked briefcase that would make his simple decision to just be present far more complicated than anyone imagined. People always say award shows are scripted, that nothing truly surprising ever happens. But the moment he stepped into the glow of the chandeliers, the illusion cracked. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered inches from plates. 100 faces turned at once, like sunflowers tracking sudden light. For a breathless second, the entire room forgot how to act. There were no rehearsed reactions for this. He walked down the center aisle in that simple dark suit, moving with the quiet, unhurried grace of someone who had once lived in this world and then walked away from it. Some stars clapped on instinct, others stared with their mouths half open, trying to decide if they were supposed to be delighted or threatened. Near the front, a director who had publicly called him emotionally unreliable shifted in his seat, his smile stiff and nervous. The cameras, trained to scan for familiar faces, jerked toward him like magnets finding true north. On the monitors backstage, Maya watched the feed in real time. A close-up of his face filled the screen, lines etched a little deeper at the corners of his eyes, beard faintly flecked with gray, but the same gentle steadiness she recognized from those old movies. The broadcast director's voice crackled over comms, half panicked, half ecstatic. "Camera 3, stay with him. Camera 1, get crowd reactions. Don't cut away, we're living in this." There it was, the machine already moving, turning a human choice into a moment, a metric, a number. He took his seat in the middle row, right where the stage manager had promised, not too close to the front, not hidden in the back. People around him leaned in with whispered greetings. He stood to hug an old co-star who looked like she might cry. Another actor, one who had once replaced him in a franchise after his disappearance, extended a tentative hand. There was no resentment in his eyes as he shook it, just a tired understanding of how this industry worked, of how quickly warmth could turn to absence without malice, just momentum. Up on stage, the host froze for half a heartbeat as he noticed the commotion. Years of training kicked in. "Well," he said into the microphone, forcing a grin, "I guess we can officially say our surprise guest has arrived." Laughter rippled through the crowd, some of it genuine, some of it relieved. The camera cut back to him for a reaction shot. He gave a small, self-conscious wave, the kind of gesture that said, "Please don't make this about me." The room roared anyway. Backstage, Maya's headset buzzed. "We need someone from floor crew to bring envelope 7 to the executive suite," a voice ordered. "ASAP." She checked the schedule pinned to her clipboard. There was no envelope 7, only the usual Best Actor, Best Picture, Lifetime Achievement. Curious, she hurried to the small locked cabinet where the official envelopes were kept. The stage manager was already there, keys in hand, his expression strained. He opened the drawer, pulling out a plain black envelope with a tiny gold 7 stamped in the corner. Maya frowned. "What's that for?" He hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no point pretending. "Emergency segment," he said quietly. "Contingency. The network likes surprises, ratings bait. It was never supposed to be used." His jaw tightened. "But now that he's here." Maya's stomach dropped. "They're going to put him on stage." It wasn't a question. The stage manager nodded once. "Not just that, they want to give him a special honor. Something they can tease online. Redemption arc, triumphant return, all the usual language." There was bitterness in his voice, but underneath it, something like shame. "I argued against it when they pitched it. I said if he ever came back, it should be on his terms." He exhaled slowly. "Now they think the universe handed them a gift." What? Maya stared at the envelope, imagining what it contained. Scripted lines for the host, a montage of his old scenes, perhaps a carefully worded speech about resilience and second chances. The problem wasn't the recognition itself. He deserved more than any trophy they could hand him. The problem was the timing. He had barely taken his first vulnerable step back into the room, and already they wanted to turn his raw courage into a signal, a symbol, a story they could control. "What if he doesn't want it?" Maya asked. "What if he just wanted to sit there and breathe the same air as everyone else for a night?" The stage manager met her eyes, weary. "That's what I'd bet my life on," he said. "But the executives aren't thinking about what he needs. They're thinking about what the show needs." He handed her the envelope. "Take it upstairs. I'll try to talk them down." The executive suite was on an upper level, overlooking the theater like a glass-walled control tower. As Maya climbed the stairs, she could hear the muffled echo of applause below. Down there, he sat under the hot lights, unaware that his night was being rewritten in a room he couldn't see. Inside the suite, 3 network executives huddled around a screen showing live social media feeds, his name rocketing to the top of trending lists, comments flooding in from around the world. "Do you see this?" one of them said, voice vibrating with adrenaline. "We just tripled our live engagement. We cannot waste this." Another tapped at a tablet, pulling up a pre-cut highlight reel. "We run the montage in the 3rd act, bring him on stage right after Best Director. He gets a standing ovation, maybe tears up a little. Boom, history. We basically saved the show." The oldest executive turned as Maya stepped in. "Is that it?" he asked, nodding at the envelope in her hand. She hesitated, gripping it tighter. "Yes, sir, but are we sure this is what he would want?" The room fell quiet. The man raised an eyebrow. "He came here, he knew cameras would be on him, he knew what this place is, and frankly, after everything, we're offering him a gift, a soft landing, the narrative of a lifetime." He spread his hands. "You tell me who says no to that." Maya thought of the earlier moment in the hallway, of the way his voice had almost broken when he said, "I almost thought I was done too." That hadn't been a man hungry for spotlight. That had been someone forcing himself to step into a space that had once consumed him, simply to prove to himself he could. This wasn't about a narrative. It was about survival. "It's just," she tried again, choosing her words carefully, "if he came back because he's finally ready, shouldn't he be the one to decide how big that step is? Maybe respect means not pulling him on stage the first second we get. Maybe respect means letting him be small tonight." The youngest executive scoffed. "Small doesn't trend," he muttered. The oldest one shot him a look, then regarded Maya more closely. "You're new," he said, not unkindly. "So I'll explain this once. This town eats people and stories. The only way to survive is to own the story before it owns you. If we don't give him this moment, someone else will. A podcast, a documentary, a gossip show. We're at least offering a controlled environment." He held out his hand. "The envelope, please." Her fingers refused to move. Every instinct in her screamed that this was wrong. That kindness, real kindness, wasn't about orchestrating a perfect emotional beat for millions of strangers. It was about protecting one fragile human heart that had already been through too much. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, feeling the familiar weight of being small in a world of big decisions. Down below, through the glass wall, she could just make out his figure in the middle row, shoulders slightly hunched, listening to someone on his left. The live feed on the nearest screen zoomed in on him as a presenter on stage mentioned unexpected legends in the room tonight. The crowd cheered, and he gave that same modest, almost uncomfortable smile. He wasn't basking, he was enduring. The stage manager's voice suddenly crackled in Maya's headset. "Maya, status on envelope 7? The oldest executive heard it and smirked. "Tell him we got it, and tell him to relax. This is the best thing that's happened to his show all year." He extended his hand again, impatience creeping in. This time, the weight of his authority felt almost physical. Something inside Maya finally snapped, not in anger but in clarity. She realized that all those nights she had survived by watching this man on screen, It wasn't the fight scenes or the one-liners that saved her. It was the moments when his characters refused to let someone be used, when they chose the harder, quieter path because it was right, not because anyone would clap for them. If she stayed silent now, she would be betraying the very thing she'd learned from him. Her heart pounding, she stepped forward and placed the envelope in the executive's hand. His fingers closed around it triumphantly. Then, before he could pull away, she held on just long enough to say, softly but firmly, "If you do this without asking him first, you're proving why he left in the first place." Their eyes met. For a brief second, the room felt like a battlefield. The oldest executive's jaw tightened. He released a slow breath, clearly not used to being challenged by someone whose badge still said assistant. "You've made your point," he said curtly. "Now go back to your post." He turned away, already signaling to a producer in the corner. "Prep the montage. We'll inform the host after the next commercial break." Maya stumbled out of the suite, her cheeks hot, every part of her buzzing with the thrill and terror of what she'd just done. It hadn't changed anything. The machine was still moving. They were going to drag him on stage and wrap his pain in glitter and applause whether he was ready or not. But as she reached the top of the stairs and looked down at the glowing sea of faces, a wild, desperate thought struck her. If no one in power was going to protect him, maybe she would have to do something reckless, something career-ending, something kind. Her headset crackled again. "Maya, where are you? We need you at stage right to cue the next presenter," the stage manager urged. She looked from the stairwell to the doors leading down to the main floor, where he sat unaware of the storm heading his way. And with her heart thundering louder than the applause echoing up the walls, Maya made a choice that could cost her everything. She turned away from the safety of backstage and started down toward the audience, determined to reach him before the envelope in that executive's hand reached the host. She slipped through the side door of the auditorium, swallowed at once by darkness and gold. On stage, a pop star was belting the chorus of a song everyone was pretending to love. Strobe lights swept the crowd, drawing attention away from the aisles, her only advantage. Maya moved quickly but carefully, clutching her clipboard like a shield, whispering, "Excuse me," as she edged past knees and designer shoes. Every step felt like she was walking deeper into forbidden territory. From here, the room looked different than it did on the monitors. It felt intimate, almost fragile. Famous faces were just faces, lined with worry and hope and the quiet exhaustion of people who had spent their lives being watched. Halfway down the aisle, she saw him, head slightly bowed, hands clasped together, listening to the performance with an absorption that seemed almost out of place. He wasn't scanning the room for cameras or reactions. He was just there, completely present, like an ordinary person at an extraordinary show. Maya hesitated. What was she about to do? She was a stage assistant, not a publicist, not a friend, not anyone with the right to interfere. One wrong move could get her fired on the spot, maybe even banned from every show this town produced. But then she remembered the envelope, the montage, the executives upstairs plotting a perfectly packaged redemption moment that might tear open wounds he'd barely managed to seal. Fear pressed on her like weight. Kindness pushed harder. The song ended in a shower of confetti and applause. The lights dimmed, giving her a few precious seconds before the next presenter hit the stage. She moved down the final steps and leaned toward the end of his row, her voice shaking. "Sir, excuse me, I'm so sorry, but—" He turned, and once again those tired, gentle eyes found hers. Recognition flickered. "Maya, right?" he said, as if he'd been expecting her. Her name in his mouth felt like something impossible. She nodded, throat suddenly dry. People in the nearby seats glanced at them, curious. "We're about to go to commercial," came the director's voice in her headset. "Stand by for the surprise segment after the break. Everyone on comms, this is not a drill." Time was evaporating. Maya leaned closer, lowering her voice to a hurried whisper. "They're planning something," she said. "The network, they have this special segment lined up, a surprise honor. They're going to call you on stage with a montage you didn't approve, a speech you didn't write. They think they're doing you a favor." His expression barely changed, but a small shadow crossed it. "Of course they are," he murmured, almost to himself. He glanced toward the stage where the host was stepping back up, smiling his bright, professional smile. "And you're telling me this because—" Maya swallowed hard. This was the line she couldn't uncross. "Because you deserve to know," she said. "Because you said you came here to be present, not to be used, and because you saved me once without knowing it. Your films did. When I was a kid, you were the only person on my screen who ever seemed to be hurting and still chose to be kind." Her voice cracked. She forced herself to keep going. "If they ambush you like this, it won't be kindness. It'll be a trap dressed up as a tribute." For a moment, he simply looked at her. Not with the detached politeness of a celebrity listening to a fan, but with the full, focused attention of someone who knew what it meant to be raw in public. Around them, the room buzzed lightly, people shifting as the show moved to a commercial break. The house lights rose just a little, softening the edge between stage and seats. He leaned back, considering. "And what happens to you?" he asked quietly. "If they realize you warned me?" Maya thought about lying, but the truth refused to be softened. "I probably don't work here after tonight," she said. "Maybe not anywhere in this business." Saying it out loud made her stomach twist. This job had been her lifeline out of the chaos she grew up in. But she also knew with sudden clarity that keeping it at the cost of staying silent would hollow her out slowly. He exhaled a faint, humorless huff. "That's remarkably brave," he said, "or terribly foolish." A small, real smile touched his lips, which usually means it's the right thing. The voice in her headset barked orders. 2 minutes to live. Host will tease a surprise. Floor crew clear the aisles. No one moves. A security guard at the back made eye contact with her, gesturing subtly for her to get back to her assigned zone. She didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs as if trying to break free. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The simplicity of the question startled her. No defensiveness, no annoyance, just a genuine willingness to hear this stranger out. Maya shook her head. "It's not about what I want. It's your life, your story. If this is how you want to come back, I'll walk away and pretend I never said anything. But if it is, if you're not ready to be turned into a hashtag and a headline tonight, then you should know you can say no, even if they make you feel like you can't." He went very still, his gaze drifting somewhere past her, past the velvet seats and golden railings, into a space only he could see. She imagined what lived there: hospital corridors, funeral chapels, contracts signed in pain, nights spent wondering if the world would be quieter without his presence. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, tinged with something like awe. "Do you realize," he said, "that in all my years here, no one has ever told me I can just say no and walk away? Not like that, not without attaching a cost or a guilt trip." Maya's throat tightened. "You've already paid enough," she said. "You don't owe them a performance of your healing." Silence settled between them, heavy but not suffocating. Then slowly he stood up. A ripple moved through the surrounding seats as people straightened, curious. "What are you doing?" she whispered, alarmed. He glanced down at her. "Something I should have done a long time ago," he replied. "We're going to talk to them." Them, the executives, the host, the machine. Her fear spiked. "They're about to go live," she warned. "They'll be furious." He shrugged, a small, almost boyish gesture. "Let them be. What are they going to do, cancel me?" His eyes held a gentleness that steadied her. "You don't start healing by asking the storm for permission, Maya." The host's voice echoed through the speakers. "When we come back, we've got a very special moment planned, when you'll be talking about tomorrow, next week, maybe for years." The audience murmured eagerly. Camera lights flashed red as they returned from commercial. Staff motioned frantically for everyone to stay seated. Instead, he stepped into the aisle. A murmur swept the room like wind through tall grass. The nearest camera pivoted instinctively, catching him mid-movement. The director's voice popped in Maya's headset, high-pitched with panic. "Why is he up? Who told him to move? Someone get him to his seat now. We are seconds from the cue." Security at the back started forward. The stage manager, appearing from the wings, held up a hand, signaling them to wait. His eyes met Maya's across the room, understanding flashed between them. She had done this, and somehow he didn't look angry, just resigned and maybe a little hopeful. Maya followed as he walked up the aisle, not rushing, not sneaking, just walking like a man refusing to hide anymore. Every lens in the building trained on him. The host faltered, glancing off stage. Looks like our special guest is a little eager," he joked weakly, trying to spin it. Laughter, uncertain, rippled across the room. Instead of heading for the stairs to the stage, the actor turned toward the wing, away from the spotlight path, straight into the narrow corridor that led backstage. A low gasp moved through the audience, confusion, disappointment, fascination all at once. People craned their necks. Phones, forbidden but ever-present, appeared like glowing insects in the dark. Backstage chaos erupted. Producers waved clipboards, someone shouted about lawsuits, the executive from the suite rushed down, red in the face, envelope 7 clenched like a verdict in his fist. "What is he doing? We're live," he exploded. "This is the moment, this is his moment, we designed this to save him." He stepped into their storm, shoulders squared but relaxed. "You designed it to save your ratings," he said without heat. "Let us be honest." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. People nearby froze, caught in the gravitational pull of a truth no one was used to hearing in public. The oldest executive jabbed the envelope in the air. We prepared a tribute, he insisted. We're honoring you. Don't you understand what a gift this is? You walk on stage, you get a standing ovation, the internet falls in love with you all over again. This is how we rewrite the story. This is how you win. For a long second, the actor just looked at the envelope like it was a bomb he'd been asked to cradle. Then he met the man's eyes, something clear and steady burning through the exhaustion. You don't get to rewrite the parts you ignored, he said. You weren't there when everything fell apart. You weren't there when the cameras left and the condolences stopped and it was just me and the silence. His voice didn't crack, but the pain in it made the hallway feel suddenly small. You don't get to skip straight to the redemption arc because it makes good TV. The executive opened his mouth, but no words came out. The crew around them held their breath. Somewhere on stage, the host was vamping desperately, buying time with jokes about wardrobe changes and after-parties. The broadcast director screamed in someone's ear. None of it mattered in this narrow corridor where one man had finally decided his life was not a storyline to be managed. He turned slightly, searching the faces around him until he found Maya. You asked what I wanted, he said. What I really want is simple. I want to sit in that room like a person, not a symbol, not a ghost, not a comeback kid, just a man who showed up to watch other people's work. I want to clap when they win and lose quietly when I don't. I want to feel the lights and remember why I loved this before it hurt so much. Maya felt her eyes burn. Around them, even the most hardened crew members looked away, moved and uncomfortable. The stage manager stepped forward, his voice low but firm. We can cut the segment, he said to the executives. We'll fill the time, we always do. The audience at home will survive one night without a manufactured viral moment. The youngest executive sputtered. You can't be serious. Do you know what you're throwing away? The stage manager glanced at Maya, then back at the actor. I know exactly what we're saving, he said, for once. The oldest executive stared at the actor for a long, measuring moment. He saw something then, not a ratings spike, not a marketing opportunity, but a man who had walked through fire and was finally, quietly drawing a line. A muscle in his jaw jumped. Then, with obvious reluctance, he lowered the envelope. Fine, he said, the word dragged out like it hurt. No surprise tribute, not tonight. He jabbed a finger toward Maya. But this conversation never happened, you understand me. You keep your mouth shut or you're done here. Maya's heart stuttered. Before she could answer, the actor spoke. No, he said calmly. She doesn't keep her mouth shut, she keeps her job. Or I leave right now and you can explain to your investors why your big ratings miracle walked out live on camera. His gaze didn't waver. She's the only person in this building who treated me like a human being instead of a headline. You want me to stay, she stays. The executive went pale. For a second, he looked like he might say something vicious. Then he saw whatever it was in the actor's eyes that said this wasn't a bluff, and he swallowed it. Fine, he muttered again, each letter grudging. You both stay, for tonight. He shoved the envelope into his jacket like it burned and stormed off toward the control room, barking new instructions. The hallway exhaled as if it had lungs. The stage manager let out a breathy laugh. Well, he said, glancing between Maya and her hero, that was career suicide averted. He touched his earpiece. We're killing the tribute. Host will pivot. Roll backup montage. See, his eyes softened as he looked at Maya. You okay? She nodded, though her legs felt made of water. I think so, she said. Maybe. The actor chuckled quietly. First show, huh? She nodded again, suddenly shy. He extended his hand like they were meeting properly for the first time. Thank you, he said, for telling me the truth when it would have been easier not to. Maya took his hand, her grip firmer than she expected. You're welcome, she managed. And thank you for teaching me how to be brave before I even knew your name. For the first time all night, something like peace settled on his face. Not triumph, not relief, just a gentle acceptance. Come on, he said. Let's go sit down before they find a way to turn this into a dance number. They walked back into the auditorium together, side by side but not touching, like co-conspirators in a quiet revolution. The cameras followed them at first, confused, hungry for context that never came. Then slowly they drifted away as the host introduced the next category, the show moving on without its big moment. In living rooms around the world, some viewers wondered why the teased surprise never materialized, then forgot by the next punchline. The internet buzzed with curiosity, then shifted to other topics. The ratings were fine. The world did not end. In the middle row, he took his seat again. This time, his shoulders were a little looser, as if some invisible weight had lifted. When the next winner was announced, a young writer in a borrowed suit, shaking as he accepted his trophy, the actor clapped with real, unfiltered joy, his eyes bright. No cameras zoomed in to capture it. The broadcast cut to a wide shot, but Maya, watching from the aisle, saw everything. As the show went on, something subtle but profound changed in the room. People seemed to lean into the speeches a little more, to listen instead of calculating their own sound bites. The director, who had once called him unreliable, sent a small nod across the rows. An actress wiped away a stray tear during a tribute to working-class parents. For all the glamour and glitter, the night briefly felt honest. Later, after the final award was handed out and the chandeliers began to dim, Maya found herself standing alone near the back doors, headset around her neck, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her whole body hummed with exhaustion and adrenaline. She had no idea what tomorrow would look like, whether the executive would keep his word, whether she'd walk into this building again or be escorted out of it. But there was a strange, fierce calm inside her. Whatever came, she knew she had chosen the kind of person she wanted to be. Footsteps approached. She turned to see him there, coat over his arm, hair slightly mussed from the long night. The crowd around them had thinned, most people rushing to after-parties or limousines. He looked lighter. "Heading out?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, back to my studio apartment and leftover noodles," he smiled. "Sounds better than half the parties I've been invited to." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to tell you something before I go." Maya's pulse sped up. "Okay." "Years ago," he said, "at another show like this, I was in a very dark place. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't even know what help looked like. Everyone around me kept saying, 'Smile, you're lucky, this is the dream.' So I did, and I disappeared a little more each time." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Tonight you were the first person in a long time who didn't treat my pain like an inconvenience or a prop. You saw me. That's rare, and it's brave." Her eyes stung. "I just did what you would have done in one of your movies," she said. He shook his head gently. "No, you did what I wish I'd done back when it was my first show. That's the difference." He slipped a small, folded card from his pocket and held it out. "This is my team's contact, not the studio, not the publicist, the people I trust. If anyone gives you trouble because of tonight, call them. They owe you a favor, and so do I." She took the card with careful fingers, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not a ticket to fame, but a lifeline to something more important. A network of people who might actually care who she was, not just what she could do. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then looked back at the now empty stage. "You know," he said, "for years I thought courage looked like stunts and standing ovations. Tonight I realize sometimes it's just showing up, saying no when the world expects yes, and telling the truth even when it shakes." His smile was small but real. "You did all three." She laughed softly. "You did too." They stood there in companionable silence for a moment, two very different lives intersecting in the aftermath of a choice that would never make it into any official highlight reel. No one would cut a montage of the girl in the headset and the man in the black suit quietly refusing to turn pain into performance. But inside both of them, something permanent had shifted. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Maya." "Yeah." "Next time they tell you you're small," he said, "remember tonight. A whole machine was about to roll over someone and you stood in front of it with nothing but your voice. That's not small." He gave her a final nod. "Take care of yourself." "You too," she replied. He walked out into the cool night, no entourage, no flashing red carpet. Just a man stepping into the darkness on his own terms. Maya watched until he disappeared around the corner, then slipped her headset back over her neck and headed for the loading dock doors, where the crew laughed and complained and made plans for breakfast at dawn. In the days that followed, speculation flooded the gossip sites. Why had the teased legendary moment vanished from the broadcast? Why had he walked backstage during a live segment? Rumors bloomed, bloated, and wild. But the only people who knew the real story were the ones who'd been there in that narrow hallway, in that dim aisle, in that small, mighty space where kindness and courage quietly changed the script. For Hollywood, it would become just another strange night in a long line of strange nights. For Maya, it was the evening she stopped believing that power only lived in bright lights and expensive suits. And for the man the world thought it had lost, it was the first time in years he walked into a room full of cameras and walked out feeling a little more whole than when he went in. Not because the crowd stood for him, not because his name trended, but because, against all the glitter and noise, one person had dared to protect his humanity. Sometimes the bravest comebacks aren't the ones everyone sees. They're the quiet, unexpected ones, where a single act of kindness in a crowded room changes the way a weary heart beats, and for the first time in a long time lets it beat freely.